Hello. Yes, it's me. I got something in my throat. Hello. Yep, this is my voice, and I'm going to be doing something a little bit different this time. Instead of just doing a time lapse, I'm going to be talking about why I drew this and who it was meant to be for. As a little bit of background, all these people were people I met through a Discord server named Tam's Tavern, belonging to a kobold artist named Tam Lin. He was always very nice, and I attended a lot of his streams back then, and I learned quite a lot from him and the people there. I didn't arrange them in any particular order when I drew this, so I'm just going to be going with whoever I drew first to whoever I drew last. First up is Phosphorite, who is represented by his current Sona, Dew. Foss had always been one of the most active participants in my journey through art, and was probably one of the first to interact with me pretty often. As a result, he also ended up being one of the first people I would ask regarding artwork and writing. He was always, and still is, very humble, and does everything he can to give constructive feedback as well as help out with motivation. He tended to remind me that there was no one correct way to do anything, and while giving pointers for anatomy and color theory, the motivation was usually the thing I ended up valuing more than anything else. And to explain this last part, I currently use Procreate, while trying to figure out how to get pressure sensitivity to work in Ibis Paint, which for some reason just refused to work for me. Foss recommended that I try the application he used. At the time, I didn't want to ask money from my parents for a hobby. After all, I was expected to be an avid student studying hard towards the sciences, not an aspiring artist. So, much to my surprise, Phosphorite went and gave me $10 to buy the application. I admit, I didn't trust it. I was very suspicious of it, but everything was fine, and Foss was very genuine about the whole thing. Procreate is what really kicked off my journey with art. In Ibis, I relied a lot on the polyline and polyline curve tools when I couldn't get a line right. While Procreate did have a somewhat similar system, it only based its shape off of whatever you drew, and the curve had a limit of 3 points only. This meant that I had to start making my own lines, and just forcing me to do that already greatly improved how I draw. I could go on and on about all the things I love about Procreate, but that'll be a topic for another video, assuming I ever make another one. After Foss, I drew Torku, the kobold belonging to a Finnish artist named Tikaka. We often called them the Elder Bold, considering they're much older than many of us, especially me. But despite their age, they were actually one of the most free-spirited and energetic artists I ever really met. They were also the first person to follow me when I set up social media accounts for the first time. I got to know them a bit more through streams that they hosted on Picardo way back when. I was one of the only viewers who regularly showed up at the time, so I often had very long rambles with them through the chat box. I continued to attend after they moved to Twitch as well, go follow them by the way, and I watched as their presence on the site grew as well. Tikaka had always been willing to advise me on my art and writing, whether it be on or off stream, just like many of the other ones had been. But something else was a lot more important to me when it came to interacting with them. Tika had always managed to somehow keep me grounded. I have a really bad habit of having unrealistically high expectations for my growth as an artist and a writer. I still do, and I would often end up being quite the perfectionist at times over the smallest details. For story-wise, I've revised the same one 7 times now, and I still don't know if I like this one. Finishing things rather than getting stuck on one part of it, taking breaks from working all the time, and just having fun with drawing rather than trying to achieve something specific are all things that Tika constantly reminds me to do. And I really appreciate it. It can be really easy to forget to do things like that a lot of the time, so having a friend who uses that as their entire philosophy for doing artwork is something that makes it very easy to remember at times, and I'm forever grateful for that. Next up is Witchy Who's It, who used this crow-themed character to represent theirself in 1 or 2 drawings before. Witchy, much like the prior two, had always been very supportive and gives me a ton of good advice whenever I ask for it. I first met them when they worked with vector art, and since then, the amount of experimentation and doodling they've been up to has created an art style that I personally really like. Switching between different mediums, different methods, and all sorts of other things was something Witchy did often, and I think it all turned out pretty well. Compared to me, their use of colors and composition is masterful, and a lot of the resources and methods I try to use to help myself learn how I want to do these things came from Witchy. Beyond that, we often would chat about random things whenever they happened to be streaming on Twitch, and overall they were always very friendly, and I often enjoy the talks we have. After Witchy came Stoen, whose character, Kioa, I hope I pronounced that correctly, I ended up drawing here. Stoen's character designs were always very complex compared to my own, and showed off a lot about each character. From their outfits to simply how they looked, the scaled adventurers you would make always stood out when I saw them. Beyond that, it was always an inspiration to see the way he improves with art, even completing the entirety of Inktober. There was absolutely no way I was going to even bother attempting that. But even beyond that, Stoen was also a very friendly face who was one of my first followers. I always saw him liking my posts and reposting my work, and for a small artist, it means a lot to have even 1 or 2 consistent supporters. I'm very lucky to have a few more than that, but Stoen will always sit in my memory as one of the very first. I should talk with him more, really. After Stoen came Hatwolf, the only wolf with a hat, I think. Hatwolf draws all manner of things, from dragons and other feral-type creatures to kobolds and more humanoid creatures, and one thing always stood out about their work: the detail. The body shapes, clothing, environments, magic, every facet blends together to make something that's always really cool to look at. Beyond this, Hat is also an avid world builder with a really interesting page on World Anvil for their project, After Silence. No joke, the whole thing is actually really interesting. I really suggest reading it if you have spare time and really like world building stuff. As someone who always aspired and still does aspire to write fantasy stories and draw them out, maybe as a webcomic, Hatwolf's development in art and world building has always been an inspiration when it really could have been a discouragement. Interacting with them is one of the reasons that it is an inspiration rather than being something that I was discouraged by. They always carried a positive air around them, and I always enjoyed whenever I got to see their work. They drew when they were in their teens according to what they tell me, but as of recently they've been drawing seriously with digital mediums for 2 years now. Yeah, I was surprised myself, especially when I look at what they've accomplished in that time, and honestly, they deserve it. And after all, if they can manage that, surely, with enough time and effort, I can eventually get to a similar level as well. Or even develop my own style for how I want to do artwork. Last, but certainly not the least, is Brandon Fasher, whose kobold character Trenton is hiding on the back of my chair in the drawing. If you caught it, Brandon was one of the people I wanted to add into the drawing relatively early on, but I just wasn't sure where to put Trenton, since I didn't really thoroughly plan out where I was putting everybody. That's something to work on for later. You can kind of tell I wasn't really sure what I was doing with it at the time. Brandon wasn't around as often whenever I was doing things, but he always appeared whenever I asked for help or was posting a work in progress or had a very vague nod to me not being sure about what I was doing. He was also another one of my first followers on social media, just like many of the others I drew here, and almost always left a like and repost on things I made. Yeah, it sounds like a small thing, but the smallest things mean a lot to people who are just starting out with artwork. He would also often lend words of advice and encouragement when I was asking questions about writing, so beyond just artwork, he was very helpful to me, and someone who was always very nice, even when he doesn't stream very often. He did before a couple times, and I was usually there to just chat and hang out and watch him draw. And with that, I think that's everyone that I included in the piece, and I hope you didn't mind how much I was talking that entire time. Alright, maybe I'll say a few more words just to fill out some more time. The tavern is, lucky for me, where I really started to try and develop myself as an artist. The beginning was pretty rough, to say the least. If you've ever seen my earlier work, you would know that. But I had met a lot of really nice people who were very friendly and offered help, words of advice, and a bunch of other things, pretty often. They even did it with one another, which was something that was very nice to see. I've been made aware many times about how difficult it can be to find someone willing to give help without being too critical of your work, or just trying to tell you how you should be drawing rather than helping you draw what you want to draw. I can imagine it would be very discouraging for beginning artists to meet people like that, and I was lucky enough to have met people like these folks first. Though I didn't include everyone in the drawing, there were a lot of other people who I briefly speak to on occasion, and follow around on socials in some cases. People like Runic, Velociraptor, Space Future, and of course Tamlin himself whenever he happens to appear. Even while I was doing this drawing itself, Tam went out of his way to ask what I was doing when I mentioned I was working on a larger project, and even made a quick guide to drawing wings, which he drew himself. The more I think on it, the luckier I tend to feel that the tavern and its patrons were the first people I got the chance to meet as an aspiring artist. I can comfortably say that I likely never would have reached the novice level I'm at right now if not for their help and support. Not to mention all the inspiration I got from looking at everything they would be drawing or writing. There are people in other servers and people in the real world who are helpful to how I develop as well, but this piece was dedicated to the first community I ever joined online. I've been in quite a few communities and other servers since then, and while they were all nice for the most part and I had a good time with them, nothing really felt so much like a online home, I guess you could call it, as the tavern did, and I'm forever grateful that that was the first place I really ended up looking for help with artwork. I love to draw, and I love making characters. Everything about what I do is just purely what I want to do. It can be kind of difficult to juggle alongside studies and all sorts of other things going on, but I don't intend on giving up on it anytime soon. So yeah, that's about all I have to say on the subject. Of course, thank you to all the people I mentioned here and to those who I met but might have forgotten. Every little thing everyone did helped make me who I am as an artist today, and I hope I don't let all the time people spent on helping me go to waste. I've been drawing for 4 or so years now, and I'm still going at it, at least. Who knows, maybe someday I'll have something I really love that I'll get to share with everyone. As an add-on off script, I really do appreciate all the things people did for me over the years that I was drawing. It really does mean quite a lot to me, and I really don't know if I would still be drawing if not for everything everyone was doing to help me out. I'll never forget it, I promise I won't, and I hope I'll have something to show for it eventually. I know I can be a bit of a downer at times, both to myself and the people I interact with, and there's a bunch of things that I could be doing better, both as an artist, a writer, and also as a friend, you know? But, yeah. I don't want to make this too much of a, drawn out snooze fest of me talking about my feelings on the matter and whatnot, so I'm just going to leave you with this. Thank you to everybody for watching and for being there with me throughout everything I was doing. If you're new here, yeah, I draw and I love making things about people's emotions and other things like that, and you can go check me out and check my friends out in links that I will be putting in the description below to each of their social pages. Everyone's really cool, they have a lot of neat stuff, cool stories, cool characters, and amazing artwork, and you should really go check it out if you want to have a little smile on your face for today. Alright, bye bye, that's all from me for today. See you next time.